You're listening to episode 82 of Liz's Healthy Table.
Looking for a healthy new way to feed your family without the hassle and hype? Welcome to Liz's Healthy Table, where your host, registered dietitian nutritionist Liz Weiss, serves up fresh and flavorful recipes with a tasty side of science, good nutrition, and fun. Are you and your family ready for some wholesome food that tastes great too? Don't change that dial. Your food adventure starts here.
Welcome to the podcast, everyone. This week's show is all about menopause and the natural ways to manage hormones, health, and happiness. My guests are Elizabeth Ward and Hillary Wright, authors of the new book, The Menopause Diet Plan. Now, this book explores the physiology of menopause. It explains the symptoms many women experience, hot flashes, and it outlines important diet strategies for managing those symptoms. So on the show, you'll hear about eating according to your body clock. Kind of cool. You'll hear about why plant-forward diets can be your best friend and why many of us should be cutting back on carbs and focusing on high-quality protein instead. And notice how I said cutting back on carbs, not eliminating them. Elizabeth Ward is an award-winning nutrition communicator and writer. She lives in the Boston area, and she is the author of several books, including Expect the Best, your guide to healthy eating before, during, and after pregnancy. So she leapfrogged, right? From pregnancy to menopause. Hillary Wright has over 30 years of experience as a nutrition educator with expertise in women's health. She is the author of two previous books, the PCOS Diet Plan and the Prediabetes Diet Plan. She's been on my podcast before, but back when I had the Cooking with the Moms podcast. And Elizabeth was also on my podcast back in the day. So it's really great to have them back on. Hillary, so she also is senior nutritionist at the Dana-Farber Cancer Institute in Boston and a founding member of the nutrition technology company Good Measures. So let's just say there is a lot of brain power between these two ladies. They are very funny as well. They've been friends for decades. So, even though I interviewed them both during the show, it was really like talking to one person. One big brain between them. They're awesome. You're going to love the show. So it has been a busy few weeks. I feel like it's just been a very, busy summer. Tim and I sold our house in Lexington, Massachusetts. I think I might have shared that with you before. We finally put our stuff into storage. And I'll admit it was difficult. I have a lot of boxes with the kids' art projects from kindergarten. Preschool. It's just ridiculous. It's hard to get rid of it all. I did get rid of a lot of stuff, but a lot of our things are now happily in storage. We are living on Nantucket, basically full time. Tim works here and I can work from home here, and I love my kitchen. And eventually we'll get a place in Boston. So I'm on Nantucket for now. Let's see what else. I've been busy on the blog. I have a recipe roundup that you must check out. You know how normally you go out for sushi, and sushi is usually made with seafood, right? But you can also make sushi with beef. And I have a recipe roundup on my website, on the blog, of 22 beef sheet recipes. So sushi made with beef. And I'll link you over to all these different other bloggers who have blogged about beef sheet. And they oftentimes will have like step-by-step guides. So you can check out recipes and guides and videos. And if you want to learn how to make sushi with beef, it's really fun. So check out that blog post. And then on my Instagram, which I really hope you're following me, at Liz Weiss, I just posted a recipe from Quaker. I actually attended this virtual cooking class, which was so much fun. It was on Zoom. And dietitian and chef Abby Gelman demonstrated a bunch of recipes, including a flatbread made with oats, with quick cooking oats. And I topped it with sliced or halved cherry tomatoes and basil pesto and fresh basil and mozzarella cheese and a drizzle of balsamic vinegar. Crazy delicious. And I am promising you, when I am done with this podcast tonight, I'm going into my kitchen and I'm making it again. It is that good. So it's on my Instagram, and you can find the complete recipe right there. As many of you may know, I celebrated a very big birthday back in August. So I can relate to the topic of menopause. And I will say I learned a lot from this episode, including why I personally need to focus a lot more on exercise. I know this, I say this all the time, but it really is important to maintain muscle mass even, before you hit the menopause years. I mean, that's the important thing about today's show. Whether you have gone through menopause or you're going through it, or maybe you're in your 30s or your 40s, the lifestyle you live now will have a profound impact on your health when you hit your menopause years. So this show, I think every woman will relate to. It's a great episode. And without further ado, here are Elizabeth, aka Liz Ward, and Hillary Wright. Hillary and Liz, welcome to the podcast.
Well, thanks for having us.
Thanks for having us, Liz.
I want my listeners to know that me, Hillary, and Liz have been working through some technology issues for quite some time. And I would say that, wow, I'm proud of us ladies. We connected. We made it happen.
Well, I'm actually very grateful to you because you're extremely patient.
We owe you a massive glass of wine.
Ooh.
That's all I'm going to say.
Well, I will definitely, when the pandemic is over, we will get together. It's all good.
Yeah. Thanks.
So just to kind of get the party started here, Liz Ward, well, and I will tell my listeners too that Liz and I go to a lot of the same nutrition conferences together, and I'm Liz Weiss. She's Liz Ward. So I did dub myself Liz 1. I'm sorry, but I did. But you're still number 1 in my book, Liz. Why don't you tell everybody a little bit about yourself?
Thank you.
Like, tell us where you live, about your kiddos, a little bit about your day job. And then we'll get into the book later, of course.
Well, I'm a Boston-based registered dietitian. I have 3 girls. I live in the Reading, Massachusetts area. And Hillary and I have known each other since college, and we've gone through a lot together. And, now we're here writing a book about menopause, another stage of our life.
It's amazing, right? When you think about, like, you guys have a very long history. Wow. What was that like when you met Hillary in college? Did you meet in a nutrition class? Were you in the same dorm? Where'd you guys meet?
Well, of course, we met in a nutrition class, but I think it was...
I think I know the answer to this question.
Please answer it.
We were lab partners in organic chemistry.
Was that the first time we met, though?
Well, it's probably, chemistry in UMass is a huge class. So
yeah.
We, probably were 500 people between us.
Yeah.
So they broke it down into small labs, and we got put as lab partners together. And
that was the end of organic chemistry forever.
Yeah,
who blew something up? Come on, true confessions here.
Blew it up. I wish I even knew what I was doing enough to blow something up. I mean, it was just all so confusing to me.
I do also remember quantity food production where we both messed up our pie crust. And then we went to the campus pond and fed it to the geese.
Is that why I use frozen pie crust all the time now?
I just see no point in putting 2 knives together.
I'm going to learn how to make
This is like
crust.
A repressed memory coming out with the pie crust.
I repressed it. She has a much better memory than I do.
Those are the only 2 things I remember that I would disclose on a podcast anyway.
That's right.
Oh, true, because I'm sure there's more to disclose. I remember when I did that food science class at University of Rhode Island, we had to make eggs, scrambled eggs, where you added water to the eggs, and I called it syneresis. Some people call it syneresis, where you add too much liquid to a protein and then it sort of leaches out. So you're making your scrambled eggs and they're all like wet and icky. I mean, could you imagine this is what you're paying? Well, back then we didn't pay a lot for college, but that is my memory of the food science class, was making scrambled eggs.
Yeah, we take a lot of varied classes. I mean, dietitians really do know a lot.
We do. Back then, there wasn't a big emphasis on culinary. Of course, now there's a bigger emphasis. And of course, I love to talk about food on my podcast because, I'm a foodie all the way. So, which brings me to you, Hillary. Liz has 3 girls. I believe you have 3 boys. Is that right?
I do.
My gosh, that is a lot of scrambled eggs.
Oh, yes.
And a lot of milk.
A lot of gallons of milk. long been telling the guy at the little bodega down the street that I would have been, ahead of it if I bought a cow instead of relying on him for all my milk. But I have 3 sons, and Liz and I always had this probably ridiculous fantasy that they would just all pair up like,
and get married.
No. And then it got down to just one. We were hoping for just one match. Just one match, but it's not looking good, but that's okay.
They're all good friends, so I also live just outside of Boston with my husband. Liz has a husband too. She didn't mention him. His name is Tom.
I thought that was a given, but I guess not.
And so my 3 sons, and as we might want to disclose, I just yanked my one who just graduated from college, who has an audio engineering background, to try to help us. So
with our technical difficulties.
Well, as I said to you guys when we were working through our tech issues, I said, you've been probably feeding this kid since March when everybody went on quarantine, and he's using your laundry detergent and probably your car. So the least he can do.
He's drinking our beer.
No.
And occasionally my wine, which I said, that's really stepping over the line. Like, you can drink your father's beer, but you need to stay away from my wine.
He's not drinking the vodka, is he?
I haven't looked.
Okay. You don't have to lock up the liquor cabinet, do you? I mean, the kid did graduate college. He should.
He's 23. It's more of I'm ticked if I go to have a glass of wine and there's none there.
Right. It's like there being no coffee in the morning.
Right.
Oh, no. I know, Liz, that you are a big coffee drinker, and I cannot imagine. So my thing is I have to have milk in my coffee. And if there's no milk, this is a major big deal. So you got to plan ahead and make sure you have your milk for the next day. So I'm just cracking up that one of you ended up with 3 boys, one ended up with 3 girls. As my listeners know, maybe they don't know, I'm from a family of 3 girls, and I am the pickle in the middle. And I always tease my sisters and say I am the most well-adjusted. So I don't know if your middle ones are the most well-adjusted. We don't have to go there. It's a menopause show.
Let's not.
I'm putting it out there. So we're talking menopause today. I just celebrated a huge birthday. And even though most women go through menopause way before the age of 60, which I'm even having a hard time articulating that number, but I was reading your book, and it turns out that 2 million women reach menopause every year. That's a lot of people. So I just thought, we use this term menopause all the time. Can you just kind of define menopause, define perimenopause? Like what is it?
Well, menopause is, really 12 months in a row of not having your period without an illness or a medication that would cause you to miss one. And of course, without becoming pregnant or from breastfeeding. So it's, what's really important is the run up to menopause, when you're talking about health and wellness, because that's a little bit more vague. While your first period launched your reproductive years, there's really typically no single event that says, hey, perimenopause is here. But it starts gradually, usually in your mid to late 40s, when you start having irregular periods and other symptoms like hot flashes, trouble sleeping, mood swings, and other signs.
So you're saying 12 months, you got to go that 12 months. For some women, I believe even, for me, I feel like it was a long run up to that time in my life. And I wasn't like super mindful of it, although I was very mindful of those hot flashes. And even to this day, I'm like all night long, I'm kicking the covers off. I'm putting the covers back on. I'm driving my husband crazy. We're fighting over the air conditioning all the time. But before you give us the magic cure for hot flashes, because darn it, if you don't, I'm totally hanging up on you guys. But what are kind of those physical things, that happen to women? You mentioned hot flashes, you mentioned difficulty sleeping, but what are some of those things that happen to women when they're entering menopause or when they're in menopause?
So one thing that kind of dovetails into that I wanted to mention is that in those years, those perimenopausal years, leading up to that time when you don't even know that you're officially menopausal until you hit that 12th month. But all those years running up, women get a lot of symptoms. I mean, a lot of women will say, my period's getting really irregular. When they come, they're really heavy. They start in with the hot flashes and the sleep problems, often long before they can ever say, aha, I'm officially in menopause. But I know for me, my periods made me so pretty much miserable by the time I actually hit menopause that I was kind of like, see you later. I was glad to see it go.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So those kinds of things like hot flashes, sleep problems, dry skin,
mood
swings. Yeah.
Weight gain.
I had those
talk
all my life, though. I don't.
No,
you're just moody. You're just a moody girl.
And it's also, we always like to point out too that there's a lot going on at this stage of life that can also contribute. Symptoms like weight gain is considered a symptom of menopause, and absolutely, particularly your weight likes to gravitate around to your middle for the dreaded belly fat. But just getting older is a risk factor for weight gain, and during those years, from your mid 40s into your 50s, women are often maybe getting promoted and getting more of a desk job or caring for aging parents. I mean, Liz could definitely testify to the stresses associated with that. Kids don't ever stop stressing you, I'm guessing, till the end of your life. Mm-hmm. So there's all kinds of stuff going on that can muck up exactly what's related to menopause. But the classic ones are, belly fat, hot mood swings, hot flashes, preference for sleeping over maybe having sex with your husband. I don't know.
Whoa, that is not in our lane.
This is a family podcast, ladies. Just a little friendly reminder there. We're going to talk about a lot of recipes, so let's not go there. All right. So my symptoms, as I said, hot flashes was a biggie. And the other one that you talk about in the book is muscle loss. Now, I am, as people know, I don't love exercise. I walk, I do yoga, but I'm not I like to bike, but now I have an e-bike. So I'm super bratty about the whole biking thing. I'm coasting along. So I'm not a big exerciser, but the muscle loss, I feel like I went through too. So that's me. Hot flashes, muscle loss. So everyone's different, right? Everybody's going to have a different experience. Is that right?
Right. All women go through menopause differently. Some people experience perimenopause for up to 10 years. Some people continue to have hot flashes well into their early 60s. So everyone's different, and you really can't compare yourself. Now, there are some symptoms that you will feel and notice, such as, the night sweats that you're talking about, and you've noticed that you've lost muscle mass. But there are other symptoms or other results of menopause that you may not feel, such as bone loss and a higher risk for heart disease because of the loss of estrogen. So sometimes we focus on what we can see and what we can feel, but, in our book, we really talk about your entire body, from your brain all the way down. So we really do get into your overall health. And I think that's something that we can't ignore and just, sort of focus on what we do feel.
I'd like to add to that. I actually don't get hot flashes, and I haven't had them aside from, I think, when I was traveling abroad once, when I wasn't sleeping like I normally do. I was eating differently. I was definitely drinking. I was in England, definitely drinking more than I normally do. And that was the closest I came to having hot flashes. And I actually I thought it was so unusual that I asked my GYN, is this weird that I'm not having hot flashes? And then and she said, well, I guess about 10% of women don't get hot flashes. But then I also said, so is it possible that my lifestyle might be affecting this? And she said, no, you're just lucky. So I think it's important for people I would like to think my healthy lifestyle habits contribute, but there are clearly people that do everything by the book and still get hot flashes. It's just a function of changing estrogen levels and how sensitive any one woman's body is to those fluctuations.
Right. It all comes back to the estrogen. Is there, though, some sort of magic bullet, some sort of treatment for hot flashes? Because I know people who are listening, if they're in menopause or still getting hot flashes, is there any supplement, anything you can do to alleviate those?
Sadly, no.
So, yeah, we looked and we looked and we looked again, and we tried to look. So, the books that Liz and I write, we try to be very mindful about being evidence-based and look for the science and what is it telling us. And, there is, it's clear that the primary treatment or the most effective treatment for hot flashes, if they're making a woman miserable, is hormone replacement therapy. And it seems, our understanding is that's come a long way. Hormone replacement therapy got a really bad rap at one point, and then enhanced understanding made people realize that, for example, my sister had really bad hot flashes, and then she got an estrogen patch that she had to stop using because the patch itself was causing a rash. And just being on that patch for a period of time after she had to stop using it, her hot flashes abated some. So whether it was just being on that for a period of time or just more time going by from menopause, there is some evidence to suggest that including soy foods in your diet may be helpful. So if you look at Asian women, they tend to have fewer hot flashes.
Or they complain less about their, you really cannot tell. I'm not saying that we complain more, but it's very, very hard to quantify that.
Yeah.
But it's not going to hurt you to eat soy.
No,
whole soy, right?
Proteins are good, and exercise and trying to get enough sleep, which is ironic because it gets harder to get, as you get older. There are some kind of integrative medicine strategies that may help. Acupuncture may potentially be beneficial. Cognitive behavioral therapy, which is a form of counseling for some women, may be helpful. Any strategies that can help women relax. Smoking definitely aggravates hot flashes. I believe drinking a lot may be potentially a contributing factor. And exercise may help, but no, it's really hard because people, without a doubt, are going to want us to come up with the magic cure, and it's really elusive.
Yeah. I did for a while this black cohosh supplement, but I'm not sure it really helped. Maybe initially I thought it did, but I don't think it really did.
Well, and the other thing that I think, so I also work at the Dana-Farber Cancer Institute, so I'm very tuned into things that may affect women's hormone levels because I take care of a lot of women with breast cancer, ovarian cancer. And so because black cohosh and dong quai, they may have estrogenic-like effects in your body. Those should be discussed with your OBGYN, your primary care physician. Foods, soy foods, whole foods are never going to be a problem. We just have to always appreciate, as dietitians do, that when you take something and you concentrate it into something that's different from a whole food, it may behave differently. So when we talk about soy foods, we're talking about tofu and tempeh and miso and soy milk and things like soy nuts. But things that could have an estrogen-like effect should just be cleared, with your doctor based on your medical history and your family history.
Makes sense. So just overall, would you say that diet and lifestyle, it sounds like it, really can make a positive impact in the management of menopause and its symptoms? I mean, even like the whole weight control thing. So it's important that we be mindful at this point in our lives, which is really the premise of your book, on our diet and on a healthy lifestyle. Absolutely a true statement, right?
Absolutely. That's why we wrote the book, because we felt like there wasn't really anything out there that was based on research that says, that eating well and having a healthy lifestyle starting in your 40s can really help you to work through the changes in your body that occur at midlife and to help you live the healthiest life from that point on.
Right. Good stuff. So in the book, you talk about the 5 core principles of menopause nutrition specifically. You talk about eating according to your body clock. You talk about eating more plant foods like this Mediterranean style diet or a DASH diet. So talk about those 5 core principles of menopause nutrition. What should we be thinking about?
Well, probably one of the most interesting ones that I think that, women don't think too much about is eating according to their body clock. And we write a lot about that. It's not just the number of calories that you're taking in, it's the timing of those calories, it's the quality of the calories. So we focus on a plant-based diet. We also are encouraging women to go a little bit lower on the carbohydrate and higher on the protein, again, based on research. And to also get regular physical activity. There's really, health is not just what you put in your mouth. It's really what you do all day too. And you were talking about muscle loss. And, muscle it's kind of its own entity in a lot of ways. It really affects health in so many ways. And we want women to build and preserve muscle, starting now for the rest of their life for a lot of reasons, not just to look good and to feel toned, but for some metabolic reasons too.
Now, you talk about eating according to your body clock. I don't really understand exactly what you mean by that. Like I will tell you, when I wake up in the morning, I'm not hungry. I have my coffee. And then when I get hungry, I almost have breakfast at the time when a lot of people are having a snack. I mean, is that kind of what you're talking about?
So the whole concept of eating according to your body clock goes back to the whole science of what are called circadian rhythms. So we now understand that every cell in our body right down to the healthy bacteria that cohabitate with us in our GI tract, which I think is really fascinating, all works differently based on time of day. And so it appeared, when you think about how human beings evolved, like throughout most of our history on this planet, we were hunter-gatherers. And prior to, Thomas Edison and electricity, the campfire, the sun went down, the campfire went out, and people were not, eating for a significant chunk of the day. So it appears that metabolically, hormonally, people are more primed to be doing our eating in the kind of sun-up time of the day. And one good example of that is that insulin, which is the hormone that helps our body regulate blood sugar, is used more sensitively by our cells during the sun-up time of the day, and our cells become somewhat more resistant to it in the later part of the day. And that's meaningful because, there's a very large chunk of our population, particularly as we get older, that develop a condition called insulin resistance, which means no matter what, you're probably going to be producing more insulin to regulate your blood sugar. And besides regulating your blood sugar, insulin is a fat-storing hormone. So when you consider that we've become a culture where we tend to not eat that much during the day, but then maybe have our eating escalate as the day goes on, oftentimes well into the darkness, particularly with computers and technology, this kind of skewed pattern of eating is likely contributing to our weight issues, our increased risk of diabetes. And so by just redistributing food to the times of day when our body can likely metabolize it more effectively may be a strategy that may move the dial a little bit for women that are conscientious about weight gain. And as Liz and I always say, you need to start paying attention to this much sooner than, wow, I just hit my 12th month without a period. Women need to start thinking about their food distribution and their calories from liquids much sooner in the game.
So interesting.
Do you mean alcohol?
Yes.
She means alcohol.
Yeah. We're back to because like you said, those calories add up, but also I'm so interested in that. So better to eat, ladies listening, when the sun is up and then not be kind of nibbling all night long, which I think we do. I agree. We go out to eat so late. It's interesting though in European cultures how they eat so late at night. I remember many years ago, Tim and I were in Spain back in the day when we could travel, and we went to this little town called maybe Santa Maria or something like that. It was a coastal town. And we went out to dinner. It must have been like 7 or 8 o'clock. And they looked at us like we were crazy when we walked into the restaurant. We were the only people. I'm like, gosh, what a mellow little town this is. When we left the restaurant, maybe at 9:30, 10 o'clock, it was as though like 1 million people showed up. It was like this wild town, but people just don't get going. They have the siesta, right? They don't get going and they're eating dinner at midnight. It's just so crazy, like culturally.
There's so many differences between cultures like that and this culture. They are so much better at noticing food beyond volume, celebrating food, maybe taking their time. I think a lot of the eating that occurs excessively in the evening here in our culture is because people are starving and they haven't eaten enough during the day. And that may also affect the choices that you make. I think there's a lot of stress eating in our culture. I think there's a lot of people that use food as the transition to the relaxing time of the night sort of thing, which is like the eating in front of the television. So, we all know that nutrition is a super complex thing, and it's always hard to isolate individual influences. But the big picture for us culturally in the U.S. is that we have a problem related to quality of the foods we're choosing quantity, limited need to be physically active, portion control, so we attempt to, in this book, come at this from many different angles while also allowing people to feel like they can still enjoy food and not feeling like we never say, here's a whole list of foods you can never eat, unless, of course, somebody has a bad allergy, it'd be a bad idea. But we try to find the middle ground, but make people realize, women in particular, that weight control is not just about calories. There are many other factors that come into play, including loss of muscle mass, the quality of the foods that we're eating, and time of day, for example.
Right. Talk a little bit about just this menopause diet plan, because a lot of your book really gets into the science of menopause, estrogen, why all these changes are happening. You give those pillars of nutrition, but then you give us an actual plan. So explain that plan, but also touch back on what you said about carbohydrates. Like we need to kind of curb the carbs and go a little heavier on the protein. And, as dietitians, we often say to people, carbs are fine, go for the whole grains. Don't be bashing carbs. You're saying here, as part of your MDP, your menopause diet plan, that we should start to curb the carbs a little bit. So just kind of explain the plan and put that in perspective.
All right, let me just start with the carbs first, because it's likely that a lot of women are eating more carbs than their body can handle at midlife. And that may make weight control more difficult. So if you look at the research, and I'm not going to take a deep dive into it, but what we found was that women who closely followed a reduced carbohydrate eating plan, which was moderate in fat and high in protein, they were at decreased risk for postmenopausal weight gain. We feel from our experience that women do not eat enough protein. So they're heavier on the carbs and they're lighter on the protein. And as we talk about in the book, as you get older, you may have more trouble handling those carbohydrates. So while we don't exclude any food on the menopause diet plan at all, including alcohol, we do not, we want people to have an enjoyable way of eating that doesn't put a damper on fun. We do concentrate on, fewer refined grains that don't offer much in the way of nutrition, like maybe crackers or, candy or cookies or things like that. That's what we're talking about lowering, not fruits, vegetables, grains, whole grains. We're not talking about lowering those carbohydrates. We're just saying take some of those extras out and it will probably make it easier for you to control your weight.
And the way we try to make that as easy as possible by presenting our plan in a plate, kind of a balanced plate mode that we worked with a graphic designer that kind of, is very much based on Choose My Plate. The American Institute for Cancer Research has a balanced plate similar. Pretty much every health organization encourages people to up their vegetable intake, their intake of whole fruits, and not overdo it on the carbohydrates, but not over restrict. So it's not a low carb plan by any stretch. Our plate has about 25 to 30% of the plate would be some sort of, preferably most of the time, minimally processed, like a whole grain breads and crackers, brown rice, quinoa, good quality starchy vegetables, sweet potatoes, yams, legumes, so we're really trying to encourage people to look at where are your carbohydrates coming from and how well are you balancing them out with protein? Because as Liz said, I know I have to kind of, once I wrote this book, if I was going to have eggs, I would eat 2 instead of 1. I'm like, I need more protein when I make my meals. So, but also, trying to increase whole fruits and vegetables, help, fill people up with quality carbohydrates that offer a lot of phytonutrients and fiber, anti-inflammatories, good quality stuff without over restricting the things we think of as classic carbs, like grains, for example, which get bashed, all the time.
I'm going to ask you a little bit about the recipes because, like I said at the beginning, I'm all about the food here, but I forgot to ask you about supplements. We did talk about like the black cohosh, but are there supplements that you think that women who are in menopause should be taking, whether it's a bone building type of a supplement? Is there anything we should be considering?
Well, we're all about food first, and so are you. But as dietitians, we know it's not always possible to get the nutrients you need by eating. And once you hit age 50, whether you're in menopause or not, your need goes up, let's say for calcium. If you're not getting at least 3 servings of dairy foods a day, then you may need to consider taking calcium. We don't think anybody gets enough vitamin D, especially around here. We live in the Northeast, so we typically recommend vitamin D. But, we think a good solid, kind of low grade multivitamin usually does the trick by filling in, small nutrient gaps that could turn out to be big problems if they went on forever. But in terms of the other single supplement nutrients that we talk about, typically calcium, maybe choline, omega-3 fats, perhaps vitamin D, that is all going to depend on your diet. So, and in the book, we go through all these categories of people that may need to consider having, supplementation. For example, if you're a vegan, you're going to need more from supplements than if you were getting it from food. If you just don't eat enough from a single food group, you don't even have to entirely, avoid it. But if you don't eat enough, you may need certain nutrients. So it really does depend. And there's a lot of detail about that in the book.
There's also the consideration that some medications may require that you take additional supplementation. So, for example, metformin, which is a really common drug used for diabetes, as well as these acid blocking medications like Prilosec, they reduce acid. That reduces acid in your stomach. These things can both interfere with B12 absorption if you take them, long term. So that's a really good reason to maybe, meet with a registered dietitian, review your medications, your medical history, your usual diet, and try to get a sense of how might I benefit from supplementation.
Good stuff. Yeah. So before we dig into the recipes in your book, I just want, we've been talking about this menopause diet plan. And I know on the plan you talk about eating a plant-based diet. What exactly does that mean, plant-based diet?
Well, and many people are confused by this, and you can almost see the panic on their face when they think a plant-based diet means you're telling them they have to be a vegan or even a vegetarian, and that's not what it means. A plant-based diet basically means that you're trying to get more of your food choices from plants versus animal foods. So it doesn't exclude either of those. So, if you use our plate as a reference, basically, 2/3 to 3/4 of the foods on the plate would be whole fruits, vegetables, whole grains, nuts, seeds, beans, but it still allows for, and then I should also add, plant-based oils as often as possible. Again, never excluding butter. We like butter too. Maybe you pick your butter for what you really want that for, but otherwise go for olive oil and other, healthy plant sources. But also making room for an adequate amount of protein that can come from animal sources, preferably those most of the time that are lower in saturated fat, low fat milk as opposed to full fat, reduced fat cheeses on occasion to offset the fuller fat ones.
I don't like reduced fat cheese.
No, I know. It's
we
really.
don't really, yeah.
It depends on how much you eat
fine.
them.
Yeah.
It depends on how much people.
Yeah, you don't have to do that.
But more seafood, trying to incorporate that into your diet. We don't eliminate red meat at all, but we tend to follow the guidance of the American Institute for Cancer Research that recommends no more than 12 to 18 ounces a week of red meat, and to try to really limit processed meats to maybe the occasion if people ever get back to Fenway Park and they want a Fenway Frank. We don't care about that kind of stuff. We're more interested in what people do most of the time. So
Right. Mostly eat plants. So plant forward. All right. So recipes, because I love recipes. And last night I baked some fish and I decided to top it with your walnut pesto that you've got in the book. And so I have a digital copy of your book. So right now I don't have it open, but let me just look here in my notes. Where was that? You had a grilled chicken recipe with a walnut pesto, and I served the walnut pesto on top of my fish. So I thought you guys could just tell us a little bit about the recipes in the book, just like what we can expect. And then can you talk us through that walnut pesto, like what goes in it?
So the walnut pesto actually has yogurt in it, and it's got, walnuts, which are so good for your gut, your brain, your heart. And the pesto is a plant. So we try to work, all sorts of elements into everything in those recipes. For example, that's just a sauce, but it's got, 2 plant components and also a dairy food, which has protein and calcium in it. So that sauce goes really well on any type of fish, particularly salmon, which I always use it on, but we showed it with chicken because people do like chicken a lot and they think it's convenient. And you could even put that on rotisserie chicken, to just dress it up. But in terms of the recipes overall, we worked very hard to get as many plant foods and whole foods in there as possible that were delicious, recipes that we love, that our families love. And we tried to keep the sugar out. That's another thing. We talked earlier about getting rid of some carbs. And so we made every effort to not have added sugar in our recipes. And, that gets a little bit hard when you do desserts. So there are a few desserts in there that do have added sugar. We have nothing against added sugar. We just wanted to help people to eliminate some of that from their diets and still enjoy their food.
And I think most importantly, these recipes are easy. These are not complicated. They're many of them are like pulling foods together is what I call it. It's not complicated. People get intimidated by cooking sometimes. And I think just knowing that you can modify things like the stir fry your way. You can decide what you want.
Tell us about that stir fry your way, because I was going to ask you that. So what goes in that recipe?
Well, I mean, I think, people can sub in any kind of vegetables they want in a stir fry, but it's more kind of from an angle of, you could put chicken there, you can put pork in there, you could put shrimp in there, you could, people can tofu, tofu is, I know tofu elicits a pretty strong response from some people. So I often recommend people go to like an Asian restaurant and have it made, at the hands of a master before they decide whether they're going to try to tackle it in their kitchen. But we all the time will buy this super firm tofu that you can get from Trader Joe's, cut it into little slices, brown it in sesame oil, and just toss it with, whatever vegetables you have hanging around. So we encourage people to think along the lines of, for I think there's a couple of recipes that are like that.
The recipes are all about flexibility, and we give people a lot of choice. So the stir fry your way is really a lot of vegetables, and again, the vegetables that you have in the house. It doesn't have to be the exact ones in the recipe. The quantity would matter. That would be helpful because you want to work in your vegetables. But then you can put any kind of protein in there that you want. And we like it with brown rice. So it really is like one whole meal is on your plate, if you will, because you've got your vegetables, your whole grain, and your source of protein. So as Hillary said, the recipes are easy. They use everyday foods. They're delicious, and
they're family favorites. The one of the ones that I contributed is chicken Italiano, which if you Googled that, you'd probably get no less than like 1,000 hits. This is, the right family version that is just, it's one of the things that I've insisted on teaching all three of my sons how to make because it's easy. It incorporates a lot of vegetables in addition to the protein. It has a lot of liquid in it, so it's very forgiving in terms of not, overcooking chicken. I would be remiss if I didn't mention that one of my dad's muffin recipes are in there. So my dad is a retired dentist, and one of his almost daily rituals is to get up in the morning and make some sort of muffin that he's always trying to perfect. And they're all high in fiber, and they all have limited amounts of sugar, and they all include nuts or dried fruit or whole foods based. So it's almost like a competition, which muffin is better than the last incarnation. So, we tried to make it very real and not intimidating in any way.
So your dad is muffin obsessed. When I had my other podcast, Cooking with the Moms, and you both were on that show back in the day, we did a muffin episode. And Hillary, just so my listeners know, Hillary was on a show when her pre-diabetes cookbook or pre-diabetes plan. What was the name of that book that you had?
Pre-diabetes Diet Plan.
Yes. Phenomenal book. And we featured you and a recipe for a chicken stir fry. And I think to this day, because that's on my new website, Liz's Healthy Table, I brought it over. And that's like one of the most popular recipes on the website. So people love a stir fry.
Yay. Yes, they do.
They love stir fry and they love chicken too. So yeah.
Right. Always looking to shake it up because chicken can get boring. So, just to wrap it up, and I had so much fun having you guys on. I'm so glad we finally made this happen just in time for my big birthday. But what would you say, like, just bottom line is sort of the biggest take home message for women in menopause today when it comes to diet and lifestyle? Like, if there's one big change, one big shift they should be making, what would it be? Because we all want to live healthier, right? We want to move into this phase of our lives and be vibrant and feel good. So what's the biggie? What's the big shift?
I think a really important take home is that women need to realize that we need to start paying attention to this long before your last period. What I see in my practice, because I am still a nutrition counselor, is women come in after they've already entered menopause and they're kind of devastated by the belly fat and the body changing. And if you start paying attention to the fact that you probably can't eat like you used to, once you get past, your early 40s, that the importance of regular physical activity, particularly including strength training activity to some degree to hold on to your muscle, is going to be really important starting, years before you ever hit menopause, because that can mediate all the weight gain that if you don't pay attention to it, you may, now what's the average age of menopause is 51 in the United States. If you're at 52, you're like, oh my God, what happened to me over the last 10 years? It's always helpful if you can sort of mediate that by trying to navigate it much earlier and reduce the amount of weight that you gain that you then have to tackle, because everybody knows that weight loss is not an easy thing.
Can I just ask you too, why we tend to gain weight? Is it because the metabolism slows down, or is it because our estrogen changes? What's happening that causes that?
Well, it's difficult to separate menopause from aging per se, but we do know that the loss of estrogen makes the weight gain focus in your belly area, and that actually has implications for your health as well. And then, of course, as we were talking about, you get more sedentary as you get older. You're not running around after kids anymore. You're not doing all those things during the day. And so you may eat more calories. And then, that changes your metabolism also because you're losing muscle as you age. So there's a lot going on there. So starting early, getting a jump start on all of this, and accepting that things are going to change is very, very important, but not depriving yourself. I mean, we like to have fun. Yeah. We still have fun, but we've definitely changed our lifestyle, depending on our menopause transition and our age.
And one of the things that we talk about, and actually we wanted to talk about it a lot more, but our editor made us consolidate, was alcohol at midlife. So, when you start to get a little bit more freedom because your kids are older and maybe you can go out and socialize with your girlfriends more, or, I actually am on a Facebook page around menopause. Somebody was put a question up there this morning that said, I've started drinking 3 glasses of wine every night because my job is stressful since this pandemic came. And, so I think it's really important that women be aware that A, alcohol has calories, B, it is, possible at midlife. There's some evidence to suggest women are drinking more than they should as they enter midlife. And so there are definitely health consequences to that. It's very clear that alcohol use and health is a J-shaped curve, meaning if you don't drink any alcohol, maybe you have a slightly higher risk of heart disease, maybe diabetes. You drink in moderation, it goes down. Anything beyond moderation, risk shoots up. And moderation, sadly, is a 5-ounce glass of wine, a 12-ounce beer. And by the way, craft beer has more alcohol than regular typical beers. So I think that's something that we're not thinking about. The higher the alcohol, the higher the calories. And then a shot and a half of spirits. But I don't know about you, but when I pour a glass of wine in my kitchen, it kind of looks a little bit higher than 5 ounces sometimes.
Mm-hmm. So be mindful. Be mindful.
Be mindful. Yeah, exactly.
Well, after all this conversation, the area that I need to work on personally is that exercise piece. So I'm going to go and I'm going to do 100 push-ups, and I'll let you know how that goes. Because I got to pull it together here, ladies. I definitely need to do more of it, but I'm aware of it. It's very hard for me to get motivated in that sort of exercise arena. And so I totally empathize with people who feel challenged with diet and diet changes or nutrition, because I feel that with exercise. So I empathize. I get it. And it's so important to work on. So this was a very nice, friendly reminder for me personally. So thank you for that.
You're very welcome.
And thank you for coming on the show. This was really so interesting. And I'm just so impressed with the book. So congratulations on the book.
Thank you. Thanks so much, Liz. And thanks for having us.
And happy birthday.
Well, yeah, thank you. Thank you.
Birthday.
Hey, I'd be remiss if I didn't ask you, because I did share it at the top of the show, but tell everybody where they can find the book and where they can find you guys on social media.
Well, they can find the book on Amazon.com. They can find me at betteristhenewperfect.com and also on Facebook and Twitter.
Yep. So any online seller should have the book. The publisher is Penguin Random House in Rodale, so they have a pretty broad distribution. It should be in bookstores. Mm-hmm. So I can be found more about me. I have about 10 jobs and many things I do at HillaryWright.com. It's Hillary with 2 L's, like Hillary Clinton. My Twitter handle is at PCOS Diet. I'm also very active in the PCOS or polycystic ovary syndrome community, and Instagram at HWrightRD.
All right. Well, I will put all of those resources in the show notes. If it's okay with you, I'll share that walnut pesto recipe because it was so good. And again, thank you so much for coming on the show. We really appreciate it.
Thank you,
Liz.
All right. And to my listeners, wow, this was a show filled with all sorts of news you can use. So hopefully this will help you guys and guide you through your personal journey with menopause before and beyond. If you loved today's show, please share it with a friend. And as always, post a review on iTunes, Stitcher Radio, wherever you get your podcasts. Head on over to liz'shealthytable.com/podcast for those show notes. And as always, thanks for listening to Liz's Healthy Table.